60 Minutes Overtime.
The human race has a very, very powerful survival instinct. And when your survival is at risk, it takes over. It takes over. And it becomes a supreme force of will.
This week for 60 Minutes, I sat down with writer Salman Rushdie. It's his first major television interview since he was attacked at a literary festival in Chautauqua, New York in August 2022. That summer day, a man with a knife rushed the stage trying to kill Rushdie, but it was an act of violence 30 years in the making. In 1989, Iran's leader Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa against Rushdie that ordered all Muslims to kill him. The controversy stemmed from his novel, The Satanic Verses, which the Ayatollah deemed blasphemous.
Our first story is about a man who is still trying to dodge a bullet.
In 1990, Mike Wallace went to a secret location in London to speak with Salman Rushdie, who was living in hiding. At the time, he was still optimistic he could reconcile with his critics.
I have to hope that the atmosphere is gradually changing. I think there's various sort of signs that it might be.
Where do you get those signs?
Well, just in the air, and it seems to me that in this country, I don't believe that that there are very many people actually who are seriously interested in doing me any harm. I don't believe that's so in the United States either. I think most Muslims, like most people, are pretty reasonable. I think that actually the world contains very few bloodthirsty people.
But despite his optimism, he would have to remain in hiding about 9 more years after that interview.
You didn't actually see a knife?
I didn't see the knife. I thought he'd hit me.
The man who stabbed Rushdie 15 times in 2022 is a Muslim from New Jersey. He said he'd only read a couple pages of the Satanic Verses and saw a few clips of the author on YouTube. But that was enough for him to feel that Rushdie's words had, quote, attacked Islam. In our conversation, I asked Rushdie about his thoughts on the status of free speech in America today.
This is a bad moment for free expression because the attack is coming from so many different directions. It used to be the case that very conservative voices were the places from which you would hear that such and such book should be banned or is obscene or is disgusting or whatever. And there's a whole project to deny children the ability to learn about the history of their own country and the part that race has played in that history, which is central. The thing that's different now is that it's also coming from progressive voices, that there are progressive voices saying that certain kinds of speech should be not permitted because it offends against this or that vulnerable group. There seems to be a kind of growing orthodoxy, particularly amongst young people, that censorship in those circumstances is a good thing. There's a movement from the left and a movement from the right. And one of the arguments that I've always tried to make is that if you look at the history of censorship, in places where there has been censorship, the first groups that suffer from that are minority groups. So to support censorship, in theory, on behalf of vulnerable groups, is a very slippery slope. It can lead to the opposite of what you want.
Is there value in hearing from voices that offend us?
Enormously valuable. I mean, how would we ever challenge ourselves if we were not challenged? There's now a kind of offense industry. Offense has become an aspect of identity politics. My view is it's very easy for a book to stop offending you. You just shut it. At that point, it loses its ability to offend you. To read, a 300, 400, 500-page book in order to be offended by it, you're doing a lot of work to be offended. Mm-hmm. This A didn't bother to inform himself about the man he had decided to kill.
At his core, Rushdie is a writer. His new book, Knife, published this week, is his way of coming to terms with his attempted murder. He says he's disheartened by people who only know him from the threats to his life, not his lifetime of telling stories.
My desire to be a writer was entirely to do with the love of the power of the imagination, of imagining worlds, creating worlds for readers to inhabit and for their imaginations to engage with, And I wish that they weren't obscured by the shadow of this kind of event.
Had that attack been successful, how would you want people to remember you?
As a novelist. That's why I became a writer. I didn't become a writer to tell my own story. You know, my friend Martin Amis had this saying. He said, what you want to leave behind you is a shelf of books. You want to be able to say, like, from here to here, it's me. I mean, I have the shelf of books. That's what I want people to look at. And hopefully, a few of them might last. You know, and that's what you want. You just want your books to be there for people to discover.